cash discounts. So in cash discounts, what happens is that it is nothing else but a discount that is applied to an invoice that a company or maybe you have to pay as a business. Now, with cash discounts, there's basically three invoice dates that you will run into, and I will explain those invoice dates and what they actually mean. Now, for anybody who hasn't run into cash discounts between different companies, this is not something new. So if you're doing a fundamentals math business course, you might run into these cash discounts. And with these three different types of invoice dates that occur, we of course need to have an invoice amount. We need to know and be able to distinguish what the rate of the discount actually is. We need to know, okay, how long do we have to take advantage of the discount? And we need to know how long, now, regardless if we get a discount or not, basically, how long are we allowed to pay this bill off? It's kind of like paying off your Visa where they give you, or MasterCard or a credit card of general, a time where you want to be able to pay this off without any penalties. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so these cash discounts. Now I kind of drew this fake little invoice. It doesn't matter what the invoice is. So you as a company have decided to buy a certain amount of items. Okay, so again, doesn't matter. So blah, blah. You have all of these items that you've purchased, and they're at certain prices that you have. Maybe along the way you got some trade discounts, and you can watch a video on that. And then finally, after your total pay, and maybe after some discounts that you got for trading, and maybe some taxes or everything else, you receive an invoice, let's say, for $1 million. And you notice here that this company has stated that it is January 15th, let's say 2020. It doesn't really matter what year, okay? But this is currently the date. So typically what we do is like, okay, I guess we kind of pay it. But between businesses and even for your credit cards, well, you can't just kind of go up and down and pay whenever you feel like it and how much you feel like it and so on. So what happens is when invoices are generated for companies, they will give terms that will tell the company that have purchased whatever items they might have, when do you have to pay this off? Now, since most businesses love to get paid as early as possible, they will try to entice you to pay as fast as possible by providing you a cash discount. So this is really to entice you as a business to pay as early as possible. Now, this has nothing to do with the invoice amount. It just means the company wants to grab their money and get it as soon as they possibly can. And in order to do that, they'll entice you with some kind of a discount. Now, but the way they write it is in a special way. And they will put this on the actual invoice that they have. All right. So we have, at the moment, $1 million that we have to pay, and the invoice date was January 15th, 2020. So these cash discounts, as I said, there is basically three different types of invoice dates that you have, where you can take advantage of this particular discount rate. So there are three types of allocating invoice dates, providing you a time frame when do you have to pay and when can you take advantage of your cash discount from your invoice. The first one is known as ordinary dating. Ordinary dating. The second one is known as end of the month. End of the month. And typically for end of the month, they will write EOM as an acronym. And the last one, the third one, is receipt of goods. And I'll explain each one. Let's start with the first one. All right, so ordinary dating. So on our invoice, we're paying $1 million, and somewhere on this invoice, the company that has sent you the invoice will provide you terms of payment. And these terms of payment will look a little bit funny. So I will explain them best as I can through an example. So for instance, they might say the invoice is for $1 million and they provide you terms that, for instance, might say 3/10, comma, and then I'll write N/30. And let's take this invoice that we were given, which is January 15th. So we have January 15th. So what I like to do is the following. So I'll draw myself kind of a timeline so that I can see this visually, what happens. Now, it says it was 2020, so I'll put 2020, and it was January. So here, right here, this is January 15th, and that's when the actual invoice is dated. And now what they said is they gave us these invoice terms. They said 310 and N30. So let's explain all of these. The first item that you see there, that 3, what that 3 represents, it represents that you or they are trying to entice you with a 3% cash discount that you would get if you pay within the first 10 days of the invoice date. So your invoice date was January 15th. So if you pay within the first 10 days, you will basically get an additional 3% discount. So instead of paying 1 million, you're going to pay 1 million minus the 3%. So in this case, it would have been $30,000 less, which of course is super useful at times if you have the money as a company and you're not making that money somewhere else. You have to allocate it. So what they said is that, all right, so within the first 10 days, so the way that we start counting is, so day 1, so day 0 is January 15th. Then day 1 is January 16th. And then it goes day 2, January 17th, and then 18th, and 19th, and 20th, and so on, okay? And you have basically the first 10 days to take advantage of this 3% discount. That's what you have. And that, okay, so that basically will land you right here, and that will be on January 25th. So if you pay from January 15th to January 25th, you get your 3% discount. But if you pay afterwards, so if I start paying after this date, right, so sometimes after, let's January 26th or onwards, no discount anymore. So here, there is no discount. So these payment terms, what we have, this 3% is known as the rate of the cash discount, and this is known as the, okay, and as you noticed, I wrote this in the agenda for us. So we have the rate of the cash discount, which was 3%, and this is your discount period, which in this case is 10 days. Is it always 10 days? No. The company can decide, or you can negotiate whatever that happens. Maybe it's 5 only days. Maybe it's only 3 days. Maybe it's 15 days. Whatever it may be, that is known as the discount period. So if you pay within your discount period, then you will get your 3% discount in this case. If you pay after, no discount at all. Now, the next item that they have in these terms, they see this N30. What N stands, so this N30, what this means that your net, the total, has to be paid off within the 30 days from that January 15th. So you have 30 days to pay everything off. Everything, and that is 30 days. Now, it is not 30 days from here. It is still 30 days from your invoice date. So what you have is that your actual payment, okay, the total has to be paid within 30 days. So this is going to end somewhere down here, and you can count the days, right? So January 25th was the 10th day, and then January 26th is the 11th, 27th is the 12th, and so on. So you can count in total how many days that would take. Let me shift this down a little bit, and I'm going to draw this. So here you have 30 days, and that is known as your credit period. Credit because you are living on credit because you haven't paid your payment off. This is kind of like your Visa, okay? And after that, they may start charging you interest or go after anything else, okay, to try to get their money for whatever order that you had. Okay, now what I have presented is ordinary dating. So what changes when you have end of the month? So let me redraw this. So I will take the same example that you have, and okay, so I'm going to draw my timeline here. So this goes on. So what we have been told is that this invoice was issued on January 15th. Now, if instead your terms, which are 310 and 30, if the company writes on the invoice, let's say 310 and 30, then so far this means ordinary dating. But they may add the acronym EOM to the end. Now, what does that do, EOM? EOM takes the invoice date from whatever the invoice date was, it doesn't matter. January 1st, 2nd, 15th, 20th, 28th, doesn't matter. And as soon as you see end of the month, what happens is that the company that has issued the invoice, they're allowing you a buffer. And what they're doing is they're saying that do not start counting your discount period, so your 10 days. You don't start counting from the 15th, but instead you move your invoice date to the end of the month. And January has 31 days, so you would move it to January 31st. If it was February, depending on the year, now 2020 has 29 days, so you would move it to February the 29th. Now, whatever the invoice date is, so if it's in January, you move it to the end of January. If it's in February, you move it to the end of February. If it's in September, you move it to the end of September. And this, what happens now, you start counting your days from here. So January 31st is basically day 0, which means February 1st is day 1, and February 2nd is day 2, and so on. So you have 10 days right here. This is your new discount period, which means that you have until February the 10th to take advantage of the 3%. That's what happens. So it is different than ordinary dating, because ordinary dating didn't have this end of the month. So that means the credit period ended on January 25th. But here you have this extra buffer for yourself all the way from the start until January 10th, where you will get your 3% discount if you pay within this range. If you pay after this range, so if you pay afterwards, no discount for you. Okay, so that's what would happen. So if you pay right here, sorry, no discount. And again, what the N30 means, N30 means that your credit period is 30 days from the time you started to count. So technically, it's actually more than 30 because the true invoice was January 15th. You moved it to January 31st. So your 30 days starts counting from right here, and it carries on until you're done. And that's when you have to pay off the total. Now, if you pay off before February 10th, then you get your discount. And if you don't, you will have no discount. You have to pay the full $1 million, but you have to pay within 30 days from counting. Okay? That is end of the month. That is the second thing that can happen. Okay, so that moves your invoice date to the end of the month. Lastly, receipt of goods. Now, for receipt of goods, which is your last one, receipt of goods. This is ROG. Again, what's going to happen is you may get your terms that they give you. So 3% within the first 10 days, or net within 30. Net doesn't have to be 30. Again, it can be 45. It can be whatever. It doesn't matter. But, okay, they will now put in an ROG at the end, and you have to be mindful of that. If they do this on the invoice, what this actually means, this means that you start counting. You start counting. So your invoice date gets moved. Start counting when you actually receive your goods. When you receive your goods, which kind of makes sense. If they're coming from far, far away, you don't want to necessarily pay until maybe you have received your goods. So they won't start counting until you receive them. Now, you may say, well, how do they know? Nowadays, everything is pretty much tracked. You're going to be signing off whatever, FedEx, whoever's delivering, they will know when you've received it, okay, when that shipment has came in, and that's when you start counting. So, it may happen that, for our example, we actually only received the goods, let's say, on February the 2nd. So, it doesn't matter that on the invoice, okay, so if we draw our timeline, this is January the 15th, which is on the invoice. It won't matter until February the 2nd when you start counting. So from this moment, right here for 10 days. So February 3rd, 4th, 5th. So all the way to February the 12th, that will be your 10 days. That is your discount period where you can take advantage from here all the way to here of receiving your 3% discount. And afterwards, so after that, tough luck, no discount for you. Now, again, your 30 days, your net 30, what happens is that is from when you received it. So it's 30 days from there and not 30 days from January 15th. So ordinary dating is the only time where you start counting on the actual invoice date. End of the month, that invoice date gets moved to the end of the month, in this case, January 31st. Receipt of goods, you start counting on the day you receive the goods. That's what happens. Final little note for you, because sometimes what these companies may do on the invoices, they may provide you terms which might be like this. So now you might be confused and going like, what the heck is going on? So this is nothing special. Now, first of all, if you've seen these terms, you should ask yourself, is this ordinary dating? Is this end of the month? Is this receipt of goods? In this case, it's ordinary dating because there is nothing that we see here, okay, to tell us otherwise. So what this would mean, okay, this means the following. So you can probably guess this. This means that you will get 5% discount in the first 10 days. Now, if you do not pay within the first days, then you can still take advantage of a 3% discount in 15 days. But be careful here, because I want to draw this for you so that you see. Because it's not an additional 15 days after the 10 days. So let's imagine the invoice date is here. So what this is saying is that within the first here 10 days, you get your 5% discount. But if you don't pay within there, then within the first 15 days, and 15 starts from the start. So in reality, okay, it's only this extra 5 days that you have, that there you will get 3% discount. So from here, that's 15 days from there. And the 10 first days that we had, okay, was from here to there. All right? So within the first 10 days, 5%. And then, okay, not an additional, I'm sorry, 3% you will get, okay, if you pay within the first 15 days. So from day 10 onwards to day 15. All right? So that's what happened. And then, of course, okay, so both of these are your two credit discount periods, and your credit period now is 45 days. So in total, okay, so what we have is we have 45 days to pay the whole thing off. All right, so I wanted to do this because sometimes students struggle with dealing with these cash discounts and how to compute them and so on. So the computation is not that hard. Okay, so if you have a discount, let's say if we go back to the 3%, what would have happened is if we had, Okay, if we took advantage of the 3% discount for that $1 million, so our invoice was $1 million. Let's say we took advantage of the cash discount, which was 3%. Well, then all we do is we want to know what we pay. So our payment is equal to, okay, so it is $1 million minus 3%. And you can take a look at the trade discount video, and you will notice that, so in order to do that, it is just 1 minus the discount, okay, in this case, times our invoice price, so this is 3%, so it's 1 minus 3% as a decimal, times our $1 million, and that is what our payment would be. So in this case, 970,000, okay, because we got a discount of 3%. And if we didn't take advantage of the cash discount, then we have to pay $1 million. Now, I will do some examples of cash discounts, combine them with trade discounts so that you can see and you can watch them on the channel. All right, thank you for watching. Hope you found this useful.